Listen to me very carefully. This is not a recommendations video. If anything, I need the recommendations because I looked at this list and I thought to myself, God, no wonder I'm not a romance girly if this was my introduction to it. Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going through the list of every single romance book I have read. Now I'm not a romance reader. I've done videos before where I'm just reading romance books, hoping desperately that it'll click for me and I'll become a romance reader because the romance girlies look like they're having the time of their lives. And I love love. I do. I'm the type of person who cries at weddings. Pride and Prejudice and Titanic are two of my favorite movies. Like, I love romance. I don't know why I don't love romance in books. Most of the romances that I'm going to mention in this video didn't really work for me, but I'm hoping laying them out in this way will reveal the common threads between what I did or didn't like. I'm not really going to go into detail as to why I rated each book what I rated it, because the romance is only one aspect that contributed to my rating, and I really just want to hone in on the romance, the characters involved in the romance. I've separated the books into two categories. One are the books that follow the traditional romance format, and the second are the books that aren't traditionally romance, but I think are mostly known for their romance anyway. And the categorization is so loose, it's practically negligent. Some of these books, I don't really know what category would best fit them. In each category, I'm going to be going in ascending order based on my Goodreads rating. But let it be known that I read some of these books so long ago that I was surprised to even see them in my read books. I can't remember them enough to really stand by them. And there were definitely some ratings that I was side-eyeing really hard because I do not think that's how I actually feel about them. But anyway, we've got a lot of books to get through. I'm going to try to fly through them. So the first book we have in the actual romance category is Devdas, which I gave 1 star to. And this was a crazy rating to me because I'm usually more generous when rating translated fiction because I never know if I genuinely dislike the book or if the translation just didn't do it justice. But this is an Indian classic, super short novella following Devdas and Paro, who are childhood sweethearts, torn apart by disapproving parents, and then their alternating willingness to be together. Clearly, there's something of value in here because I think I heard that it has a bunch of adaptations and it's a well-loved classic in India. But me personally, I found the male lead insufferable and so annoying. The next book is Dear John by Nicholas Sparks, which I gave 2 stars to. This is a romance between a girl and an army guy who keeps re-enlisting and their attempts to maintain a long-distance relationship despite the fact that he keeps re-enlisting. I did read this for one of my old vlogs, so I went back to that video to see what I had to say about it. Made me want to shrivel up and die. But one of the main complaints was the insta-love. I think they only had like a week-long summer fling or something like that before they decided that they absolutely wanted to be together and they were going to do long distance and all of that jazz. There are only 2 situations in which I may be willing to look past insta-love. One, if there's like a cosmic reason for this insta-love, like they are quite literally soulmates. Or 2, they're teenagers. Because yeah, teens are speedrunning shit all the time. Also, I don't think I like romances where the woman is expected to just wait around all chaste and lonely while the man is off doing whatever it is he wants, fully expecting her to be there waiting for him when he's ready. Especially because in this case, it's not because of circumstances out of his control. He chose that. I like a romance where these two people are like always choosing each other. The next book is Dash and Lily's Book of Dares, also 2 stars. Can you hear the sirens outside? My God. Cool. So this is a YA staple about Dash and Lily, 2 teenagers who fall in love via a notebook where they're exchanging notes and dares. In theory, this could have worked for me because I love letters as a literary element, plus it's set around Christmas and I love the holidays. In practice, it fell flat at best, and at worst, it was actively annoying. I remember that I found Dash pretentious, and I felt like Lily was making quirky too much a part of her personality. Also, this book did not age well. The TV adaptation of it, so much better, so cute. I would actually recommend watching that one. The next book is I Heart You, You Haunt Me, which is so forgettable that I had no idea what it was when I saw it in my list of read books. I think I gave it 3 stars. I literally can't tell you anything about it because I don't remember reading this. It's apparently about this girl, Ava, whose boyfriend has passed away and who is now haunting her. The next book is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which I also gave 3 stars to. This is set in an alternate 19th century where some people have telekinetic abilities, including our main character Nina, who starts to bond with Hector and fall in love with him over their shared telekinetic abilities. Now, I'm just gonna say it, Nina deserved better. I literally didn't care about their romance. I'm not into male interests who aren't totally smitten and drawn to their female love interest. Like if I wanted toxic manipulation in a relationship, like I just watched reality TV, the only reason that I was rooting for their relationship in this book at all is out of spite, because I hated the villains in the book even more than I hated them together. The next book is Heartbeat Braves by Pamela Sanderson, also 3 stars. This is about Rayanne, who works for Crooked Rock Urban Indian Center and who is a tragic victim of nepotism because her passion project is taken from her by her boss and given to her boss's nephew, I think, who isn't even really involved in the indigenous community to begin with. The romance part of it was cute, I guess, but like the least interesting part of the book. The family dynamics and the community aspect were far more interesting. Then we've got Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, 3 stars as well. This is a queer historical fiction taking place in San Francisco during the 1950s Red Scare. Lily is a Chinese-American teen who's figuring out her sexuality through the help of her new friend Kathleen. Through the help of her new friend Kathleen and a lesbian bar known as the Telegraph Club. Honestly, the reason this book got 3 stars wasn't because of the romance. It was just because it didn't deliver the kind of experience that I was expecting it to, so it kind of disappointed me. The romance itself, quintessential queer teen romance that I think also perfectly captured what it feels like to feel like you don't belong in LGBT spaces, but also are hopelessly drawn to them. But again, this is another situation where I thought the community aspect outshined the romance. All right, and now we have the first book that I physically have, and it's, of course, at the bottom of the pile, so The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight. 4 stars. But a 4 stars that I'm willing to admit it probably doesn't deserve. This is a YA romance between Hadley and Oliver, who meet at the airport and then bond during a very long flight while Hadley is flying to London for her father's wedding. And then they lose contact in the airport, and then the whole story is about them trying to find each other. I first read this book when I was quite young, so I think the only reason it has 4 stars is because of nostalgia. I think the reason why I liked it so much in the first place is because I really love like serendipity. I love when characters come together and fall in love just because there were so many little chances that brought them together. It's almost like the universe itself arranged itself to make sure that they would meet and they would fall in love. And I think that's so cute. I think it's so romantic. I love it. I do, however, think this book would not work for me today if I were to reread it. All right, next we've got Assistant to the Villain, 4 stars as well. So a little bit of an aside before I get into my feelings on this book. Whenever people say they hate romance books, I'm a little sus about why, because there are plenty of people who just genuinely don't really like the genre. It's not their cup of tea, totally fine. But there's a concerning amount of people who say they don't like romance books because they hate anything that's traditionally brought women joy. And because they think that romance books aren't quality literature, and of course they as non-romance readers are much more highbrow. They just have this idea that they have better taste in books just because they don't like romance. I am not that person, which is never so evident as when you see certain books, like Assistant to the Villain, get a high rating from me when we all know damn well that this is not high quality literature. Me not being a regular romance reader does not mean that the romance books that I like are actually good. Sometimes they're books with subpar writing that could have used another round of editing that still managed to entertain me because I like a good bit. And you know what? Assistant to the Villain committed to the bit. I hadn't personally before read a funny, lighthearted book about a fairy tale-esque villain who still has to do shit like paperwork and therefore needs an assistant. I thought it was great. I did enjoy the banter and the dynamic between our main character and the villain, her love interest, but I do think there was a lacking chemistry. You know, it didn't go deep enough to actually convince me of a good romance. And maybe the second book will do that. I don't know. The next book we've got is The Light We Lost, which I gave 4 stars to as well. This follows Lucy and Gabe, who meet in college and then keep coming back to each other over the course of like 13 years while they're living their lives, building their careers, getting married to other people, mind you, and stuff like that. I can't quite remember, but I think there was cheating in this book. I hate that with a burning passion. It's one of my biggest deal breakers, honestly. It is a very, very rare author who can make me sympathize with a cheater enough for the book not to be completely ruined. What I think this book had going for it is that it had a lot of drama and emotions, and I do think it broke my heart a little bit towards the end, which I love. The author, Jill Santopolo, I think kind of fell over the line into pretentious a few times, but overall, like not that bad. Next, we've got Water for Elephants Elephants by Sarah Gruen. This is about a vet named Jacob who runs away with the circus, falls in love with one of the circus performers, who is unfortunately married to the ringleader. I just wasn't emotionally invested in this. I'm pretty sure my favorite character out of the whole book was quite literally the elephant. Yeah, I probably should have gotten 3 stars instead of 4. Then we've got The Time Traveler's Wife, which I gave 4 stars to, and I cannot believe I gave 4 stars to because I was dead certain that I gave it much lower rating. But this is about Henry, who has a genetic condition that means he gets pulled forward and backwards in time against his will. And the romance is between him and Claire, who decidedly does not have this genetic condition, and so they experience their romance all out of order. I finished reading this book feeling like it was 500 pages or something worth of grooming. Like, let me put this into perspective for you. I think Henry was 36 when he first met Claire, or when Claire first met him, and Claire was 6 years old. And then the first time they had sex, I think she was like 18 and he was in his late 30s or something like that. And because of the time travel aspect, and because she met him so young, she knew from like a very early age that she ended up marrying him in the future, which if you think about it for too long, is super gross. This premise is done so much better and so much more ethically on Doctor Who between the Doctor and River Song. Next, we've got Every Day by David Levithan. 4 stars as well, undeserved probably. The premise here is that our narrator wakes up in a new body every single day. And one of these days he meets the girlfriend of the body he's inhabiting and they fall in love with her. And so every day after that, in whatever body they are in, they are trying to find this girl. And I understand that I literally just said I love people in romances who choose each other all the time, but I didn't quite mean like this. I remember being far more invested in the logistics of how this works than the romance itself. Next, we've got 3 books by Helen Huang: The Kiss Quotient, The Bride Test, and The Heart Principle, all of which I gave 4 stars to. So let me just give you a quick rundown of what each one is about. For The Kiss Quotient, our main girl Stella is very inexperienced with intimacy, and her solution to that problem is to hire an escort to teach her. In The Bride Test, the main love interest Kai has no faith in his ability to find his own wife, so she flies to Vietnam and finds Esme, who is willing to seduce Kai for the opportunity to get married and be able to immigrate to the US permanently. And then in The Heart Principle, our main character Anna is a burnt out violinist who has a one-night stand with Quan after her piece of shit boyfriend says that he wants to have an open relationship just out of the blue. With all of these, I found them entertaining at the time, and I totally understand why people like them. I really do. But they didn't stick with me. I think I appreciated the representation of neurodivergency and the relationship with the side characters more than I cared about the romance itself. I will say The Heart Principle, I think, is my favorite out of all of them. I think it had more of an emotional impact and more depth to it, which I really loved. But that was more so based on what the characters themselves were going through on an individual level. But here's where we get into another aspect of romances that I have strong feelings about, and that's the level of spice in romance books. Now, these books had a relatively super low level of spice. I think they did describe the events that happened instead of like alluding to them or doing like a closed door situation, but the events themselves were super vanilla. And I'm not a prude. I'm not easily fazed by things. I am, however, easily bored and easy to cringe. I just don't read romance books to read spice. If I wanted spicy scenes, I would just read fan fiction where people have been writing it for way longer and way better. If I'm taking the time to read a whole new book with whole new characters and whole new backstories, I want to get to know them. I want to feel that tension that can happen in the beginning of a new relationship where you're just getting to know each other. You know, like the scene in Pride and Prejudice where he clenches his hand or whatever? Yeah, that. I want that. And in the scene leading up to Jack and Rose sleeping together in the carriage, okay? I do not want spice where it feels like it cost us nothing to get there. And more often than not, it's just boring to me. A lot of the sex scenes that I've seen feel like they're there more to do fan service for the readers, more than it reveals really anything about the characters and more than it moves the plot along. And I'm not saying that that's the case with the Helen Huang books. That's not what I'm saying. I don't remember them well enough to say one way or another. If somebody says that a book is like super, super spicy and like that's all they talk about in their reviews, that to me says it's probably not going to be a book that I care about. But we're moving on to Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto, which I gave 4 stars to. In this, our main character, Medi, accidentally kills her blind date and she enlists the help of her mom and her aunts to help her hide it, all whilst they're working a major wedding. And things get a little complicated when the one that got away for Mehdi also happens to be attending this wedding. I'm not going to say much here. The romance in this book had really nothing to do with the rating that I gave it, and I don't remember much about it. Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, I gave volume 1 4 stars, and then volumes 2 through 4 I gave 5 stars. This is a cute graphic novel series following Nick and Charlie as they fall in love and get through high school. It was wholesome, it was sweet. I love seeing LGBT people happy. It was entertaining enough while I was reading it online as a webcomic, but it wasn't so great that I felt compelled to keep reading after I had already caught up, or compelling enough for me to feel like I want to read it physically. I think it's perfect for high schoolers, but a little too young for me. The next book to talk about, though, is another graphic novel series. It's called Check Please. I don't know what rating I gave it because I remember reading it as a webcomic as well, but I read it and I never rated it on Goodreads because at the time I don't think it was listed on Goodreads. This is another queer graphic novel. I think it's set in college instead of high school though, and it's following Eric, who is a former figure skater now on the hockey team, and Jack, who is the captain of the hockey team. Again, I don't remember a lot about it. It was a long time ago, but I remember having fonder feelings for Check Please than I did for Heartstopper. I remember rooting for them more. I remember my heart melting more. If I had to say, I think I preferred Check Please. The Lost Letters of William Wolfe. Wolfe? Yeah. The Lost Letters of William Wolfe. I feel like I'm saying wolf weird. You dramatic bitch. I gave this book 4 stars. In this book, William is working for the Dead Letters Depot, which is tasked with finding the proper home for letters and packages that get lost in the mail, get destroyed, the address is hard to read, that kind of stuff. And while William's marriage is getting increasingly strained, he starts becoming really fascinated by these series of love letters that he finds that is only addressed to my great love. Now I know what you're thinking, but Jess, you just said that you hate cheating in books, and this sounds like an emotional affair. Correct, but I can get past it because this is way less infidelity than you would expect. And also William and his wife are so neck and neck with their marital sins that there's no villain, really. There's plenty of criticisms to make about this book. I'm sure some people would find William creepy in some of his actions, and I totally agree, he kind of does. However, I enjoyed the journey. I found it bittersweet, I found it melancholic, and despite how the synopsis sounds, this is more of a romance between William and his wife, who still deep down love each other, but they've drifted apart and they don't really know how to reconnect. So I appreciated that. If we're being totally honest though, the reason it got 4 stars is because I really love love letters in books. I just find them so romantic and revealing of someone's heart, both in their romance and in their sadness. Moving on. Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I've read the whole trilogy and I gave all of them 4 stars. This is about our girl Rachel, who's Chinese American. She agrees to go to Singapore with her boyfriend to go to his best friend's wedding, I think, cousin's wedding, somebody's wedding. What she does not know, however, is that her boyfriend Nick is a member of one of the richest families in the country. I wish I could tell you literally anything about these books, but I don't remember. I remember them being entertaining enough that they kept me occupied on a long flight to Europe. Regardless, however, I feel confident in saying that the movie is better. The wedding scene, where the whole crowd hushes as the bride appears, lives in my head rent-free. While I was writing the notes for this video, I literally stopped writing notes just so I could look up that single scene on YouTube and watch it again. Next, we've got You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. 4 stars again. This follows Liz, who is trying to become prom queen so that she can win a scholarship in order to go to college. It's a queer love story between Liz and one of her fellow competitors. As a book, I just kind of found this okay. YA contemporary is starting to get harder and harder for me to really connect to because I'm getting older. However, a sapphic YA contemporary has such a higher shot of winning me over because these are books that didn't exist when I was their age. They didn't exist when I was in middle school or high school at a time where I think I really needed it or would have just really loved to have those kinds of stories and to be able to see my own experiences in a book. So I have a really soft spot for all of those books that exist now. I don't really want to get into spoilers, but there's one scene in this book where Liz, our main character, is essentially saying that she wants to, I guess, scream at the top of her lungs about the feelings she's having. And I remember relating to that so much. I just want the baby gays to be happy. Next, we've got The X-Hex and The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. I've read both of them. I think I gave The X-Hex 5 stars, and then The Kiss Curse I gave 4 stars. These are 2 wholesome witchy romances. In The X-Hex, our main character Vivian cast a curse on her ex-boyfriend, and then the 2 of them need to band together when that curse starts wreaking havoc across their small town. And then the second book, The Kiss Curse, follows Vivian's cousin and the main love interest from the first book, his brother, who now have competing witchy-related stores across the street from each other. I enjoyed both of these books. I found them silly and fun, and I loved the banter between the couples. I appreciated that they had a goal/plot besides them falling in love with each other. And I even think that Erin Sterling had a good balance with the spicy scenes in the book between showing the attraction between the characters and getting so hyper-focused on the sex scenes that you lose sight of the actual plot line. Like a love song, I gave 5 stars too. Y'all have heard of PR relationships, right? Well, this is what this book is about, essentially. It's a PR relationship between a Brazilian-American pop star, Nathi, and a British indie film star, William. Reading this book just made me so happy. They were cute and wholesome. I liked that we got to see them become friends before they fell in love with each other. I loved their interactions and their banter. I loved all the side characters, and I really liked that both of them had their own personal journey to go through beyond just, the romance happening. Next, we have Warm Bodies, which I gave 5 stars to, but I don't remember anything about. It's a Romeo and Juliet story between a zombie and a human girl. I read it in high school. I don't know. Let's just move on. Honey and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating. I gave it 5 stars. In this, popular girl Honey comes out to her friends as bi, and her friend group does like the worst thing they could have done, and they invalidate her. So she panics and says that she's actually dating Ishu, another girl in school, and they come into an agreement to pretend to date for their own various purposes. I remember thinking they were cute. I think the parts that I liked more, though, were those related to their own personal growth. Next, we've got Tweet Cute, which I gave 5 stars to. This is another YA romance, which I've read a weird amount of, considering I said that I think they're too young for me, so perhaps I'm just a liar. This is a romance between Pepper and Jack, 2 high school students who find themselves embroiled in an anonymous Twitter war because they each run their respective families' restaurant profiles. The Twitter war starts over a grilled cheese recipe, and then it becomes more personal because they 2 are simultaneously getting to know each other and falling in love over a messaging app. This was so cute. I won't even hear anything about it. I will not hear anything about the quality of it. I don't care. I loved their sassy conversations. I loved their sassy fighting. I loved it even more when they became friends. I loved their family dramas. I loved it enough that I was willing to look past the unnecessary epilogue. I just remember reading this and not being able to stop myself from grinning because I was just like kicking my feet, giggling. They were adorable. Next, we've got Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I gave 5 stars for this. I don't know how many people really need a summary for this because it's a classic, but in case you do, this is about Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy, who get off on the wrong foot and then have to get past their own pride when they start falling for each other. Hello, my love. I don't remember much about my experience with the book, but I do think I remember thinking that the book does the movie justice, and I love the movie, so... My darling, do you want space? No? Okay, I'll be done before you know it, okay? Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, another 5 stars. This is a romance between the son of the US president and the Prince of England. The 2 of them get into a scuffle that makes its way to the tabloid front pages. To do damage control, the 2 of them are forced to pretend to be friends in front of the public eye. And of course, obviously, they start falling in love. I really loved this book. I've heard a lot of the criticisms that people have about it, and all of them are valid. I completely understand where they're coming from. But it has so many of the things that I have realized that I like. There's a good amount of bickering between our main couple. There were some solid side characters that provided heartwarming platonic relationships as well. Each of them had their own personal journeys to go on. And perhaps most importantly, there were love letters. By the end of this video, you will see that I will crumble at any instance of characters creating something to demonstrate their love for each other. Typically love letters, but you'll see why I didn't just say love letters later on in this video, because some of the books in the other category get very creative. The email exchange that happens in this book is the part of the book that stuck with me the most, alongside the main character's conversations with his parents regarding his sexuality. The last book I have in this category is the most recent romance I've read, which was Sunburn by Chloe Michelle Howarth, a 5-star, obviously. This is a lesbian coming-of-age story that takes place in 1990s rural Ireland. Our main character, Lucy, is dealing with the pressure of her entire small town expecting her to to end up with her guy best friend. Meanwhile, she is falling in love with her friend Susanna. At the moment, this is my absolute favorite book in this category, and I think of all the books I'm going to mention, not my absolute favorite, but I think maybe number 2. You can hear my full thoughts on it in the video on my favorite books from 2025, but it emotionally destroyed me. The yearning, the infatuation, it was so beautifully written and so raw. I thought it was one of the best depictions of not only your first love as a teenager, but of being a sapphic girl who doesn't have the most supportive family and struggling with not being ashamed of your own sexuality. Again, a lot of the same elements that I've been mentioning: major personal journey, love letters, more tension than there is spice. There are mentions of sex, but it's more referred to versus described in extreme detail. It doesn't have the banter dynamic that I usually love between my couples, and it does have another thing that I don't typically like in romance books, but it more than makes up for it with just how beautiful and devastating it is. This book actually hurt my heart, and I do love some actual heartbreak with my romances. I think it makes the happy ending so much sweeter. This one is actually a recommendation. If you haven't read this book before, I highly recommend giving it a shot. All right, so now we're finally onto the books that aren't traditionally romance books, but I think are largely talked about for their romance. By which I mean, romance was not one of the first 2 or 3 tags on Goodreads. Again, super loose category. These are just the ones that I felt like needed to be mentioned because it says something about my taste, maybe. First, we've got the first 3 books, I think, in the Vampire Diaries series by L.J. Smith. Oh my bad, the first 4. 1, 2, and 4, I gave 2 stars. And then the third book somehow got 3 stars out of me. I don't know how. This is a teen vampire love triangle, and I'm not describing the series beyond that, because if you haven't heard of this before, I do not want to be the person that somehow compels you to read it. I hated these books. You can see more of my thoughts on it in my Battle of the Vampires video, but I hated this experience. This is one of the worst cases of insta-love I've ever seen. And I vaguely remember thinking all of the characters were either insufferable or creepy or both. And the next one on the list is another teen vampire romance. I gave Twilight by Stephanie Meyer and Eclipse 2 stars, and then the other 2 books in the series, New Moon and Breaking Dawn, I think, were both 3 stars. Only marginally better than the Vampire Diaries because I do think the writing was a little bit higher quality. I can concede to that. It's just another YA romance between a human girl and a vampire boy, and the age gap nonsense that happens in these kinds of books, I don't think it's talked about enough. I think I would much prefer it if everyone was at least in their 20s, but alas. I will say I liked the romance between Bella and Edward better in the books than it was depicted in the movies. I think in the books you can get a better idea of how exactly Bella and Edward fit together as a couple, and you can see that Bella has enough sass to kind of hold her own with Edward. I mean, that's the main compliment I can give regarding the relationship, because beyond that, Edward was sometimes too often too controlling and too patronizing. I'm not a fan, and do not even get me started on Jacob and his toxic manipulation of boundaries. And then we've got the Kiss by an Angel Omnibus by Elizabeth Chandler. I gave the whole bind-up 3 stars. This is about Ivy and Tristan, who were in a relationship together until Tristan died in a car accident. And then Tristan has come back as an angel because he figured out who caused the car accident, and he needs to warn Ivy to try to save her. I don't remember anything about this series. I'm not going to say anything. I feel like I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. Next, we've got Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which I gave 3 stars to. This is a Queen of Hearts origin story following Wonderland's Queen of Hearts while she is still an innocent young baker who has captured the attention of the king, but is actually secretly falling in love with the court jester. Sorry, I misspoke. His name is Jess, and he is described as the court joker. Okay. Stupid name aside, I do have a lot of fondness for this book. I don't really remember the details of why I felt so fond of it, but I do remember enjoying it. Our main couple does have a secret courtship, which adds some drama and tension to things, which I already said that I love. And I do remember the ending kind of breaking my heart a little bit. Again, another thing that I've said I've loved. Next, we've got Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation. Volume 1 was 3 stars, and then volume 2, 3 were 4 stars. I did read volume 4 and 5, but I didn't log them on Goodreads apparently, so I don't know what my rating is for that. So my feelings about this series is going to be hard to describe. This is a translated Chinese fantasy series following Wei Wuxian, who was one of the most talented cultivators, think magical swordsman, of his generation, up until the world went through a war and he emerged vilified as a demonic cultivator. He's eventually killed, but many years later, he's revived and reunited to solve a mystery with Lan Wangji, who he has a complicated history with. Now here's where my my feelings get complicated. I just don't think the quality of the writing in here is very good. And I don't know if it's because of the translation. I remember seeing quite a few reviews from native speakers who said the translation does not do the story any justice. So I think it probably is because of the translation. Either way, I wouldn't recommend this series to people who didn't have at least a fan fiction phase growing up and are used to digging through poor quality writing to get to the gems at the heart of the story. Because the story itself is good if you're capable of reimagining it. And my feelings on the translation contribute at least partially to the fact that the reason I love the romance isn't because of the books. While the series is marketed as a Danmei series, which is to say a romance between two male characters, I don't actually think the romance is like super present in the story until later on in the books. Obviously the foundation is laid out, but there's like a lot of things going on and the romance is really not at the forefront of it for a while. The reason why I love the romance so much is because of the various TV adaptations, which I absolutely recommend, and because of the life that fanfiction writers, and there are so many, have breathed into their relationship. They are real, true soulmates, and I live for that shit. Have y'all ever heard people say that most romances fall into three categories at the base of them? They're either variation of Romeo and Juliet, Orpheus and Eurydice, or Penelope and Odysseus? Okay, well, Wei Wuxian and Lang Wangji thought that they were Orpheus and Eurydice, and they were lucky enough to actually end up being Odysseus and Penelope. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Otherwise, I will spend 20 minutes talking about them. Mistress of Rome by Kate Quinn. I gave it 4 stars. This is a historical romance taking place in 1st century Rome between a gladiator and a slave girl who manages to reinvent herself as a famous singer and capture the attention of the emperor. I liked this book for the court politics and the shady scheming, not for the romance. I just thought the characters had no real chemistry. If anything, I thought it was out of character for them to bond the way that they did. And then there is also a weird age gap. It's like a 20-year age gap, and I don't know why it had to be that way. Next up is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, which I gave 4 stars to. This is about Addie, who centuries ago struck a deal with the devil in exchange for living forever. She is cursed to be forgotten by everyone the moment she leaves their sight. And so this story is about her stumbling through the centuries until she comes across a boy who manages to remember her. I remember thinking this was beautifully written. However, I don't think I was emotionally invested in the romance itself until we got to the heartbreaking points of the plot. So I think I liked it more when they were sad, which we're not really going to look into too much. All right, The Fault in Our Stars, 5 stars. Classic YA book about Hazel and Augustus who meet in a cancer kid support group. Literally the only thing I remember liking about this book is that it almost made me cry, which says that I love being emotionally destroyed by books, but doesn't necessarily say a lot about the kinds of romances that I like. I'm honestly pretty confident that if I reread this book, it wouldn't work for me today. Okay, y'all, we are on to our last 2 books. First, we've got The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This is about Celia and Marco, 2 magicians who were raised in different schools of teaching, who are trapped in a decade-long exhibition to try to prove who is the better magician. Their arena is a mysterious circus that appears overnight around the world. There are people who would maybe say this isn't a romance because they don't actually meet each other until halfway into the book, like well into the book, and the relationship is underdeveloped. Those criticisms are correct. I think the beautiful atmospheric writing of this book does color my perspective a bit, but honestly, despite the criticisms, I think Morgenstern did a great job of making this a deeply romantic book anyway. There's one character in the book who describes these magical exhibitions between the 2 of them as love letters encased in tents. And by this point of the video, you should already know how I feel about love letters. Once I started interpreting their actions through that lens, I was done for. I also think I like romances with like a little hint of viciousness at least. The relationship between these 2 is like nowhere near the fierce competition that's promised by the synopsis. Like there's not even an attempt at murder. It's ridiculous. But I could see how in different set of circumstances there would at least be a little stab, you know, if they were slightly different people or if they were slightly less fascinated by each other. But while we're speaking of viciousness, let's get to the last book in the video and also my favorite book in all of the video. This is How You Lose the Time War, which of course was 5 stars. This is about 2 agents on opposing sides of a time war. Their respective agencies each have their own ideology and vision for how they want the world to look. And so their agents travel through time to kind of nudge the timeline towards each of their their own visions. If you've read this book, you already know what I'm going to say. The letters, the love letters, oh my God. It's a perfect blend, honestly, because when our characters start exchanging those letters, they're definitely enemies and they at least 40% want to kill each other. So there's that level of viciousness that I just said that I like, delivered in such imaginative and weird ways that they barely meet the definition of a letter, but they are. And then of course they become love letters. And it makes me so soft that at one point I practically fell to pieces just because of the names that they used to address each other in their letters. I love their letters. I love their individual powers. I love when couples choose each other, even when choosing each other means surmounting impossible obstacles. And that's a wrap on what feels like a long list, but is actually depressingly short for any actual romance reader. If you got something out of this list, if you somehow walked away with a book you're interested in reading now, I'm so happy for you. If you sat through this video listening to my ramblings and you thought to yourself, Jess, I know exactly what you need to read, I am begging you to drop it in the comments. Because I truly want to be a romance girl, but the synopses that I'm seeing just aren't compelling enough for me, and I need some help sifting through for the gems that would suit me the most. Thanks for watching, friends. I'll see you in the next one.